Known as the Red Ripper, the Butcher of Rostov, serial killer Andrei Chikatillo tore his way through an already anxious, paranoid, and harsh Stalin-era USSR with his extreme acts of sadomasochism and cannibalism, claiming a body count of at least 52. Those closest to him, though, his wife, colleagues, and children, knew him as an insufferable prick, a Stalinist simp, a hardline communist with a severe compensation complex. Leading up to Chikatillo's birth, the rapid and constant evolution of Russian society left most of the population destitute of the war-torn nation. Within just 10 years, Russia's autocratic Tsar, Nicholas II, made such a series of blunders, like losing a war with Japan and inviting a smelly homeless wizard to take reins of power during a major military global conflict, that inspired a resistance to raise up, which led to a civil war, which ousted the Tsar, and installed a different type of autocrat, who made a lot of reforms, suffered a series of strokes, and died, leaving a rather ill-tempered man with a full mustache to place himself in the position, implement more reforms like rapid industrialization, and force labor camps for political enemies. Chikatillo was born in the region of modern-day Ukraine, during a man-made famine known as the Holodomor. 10% of the Ukrainian population would be lost from starvation, famine-related illnesses, or execution during the Holodomor. Add on to that the harassment by Stalin's secret police, looking out for dissent and counter-revolutionaries, and just being generally awful, and it all added up to one unappealing borscht, which the people during the Holodomor would have probably still liked to try and eat. People resorted to eating leaves, grass clippings, and rodents. Stories of cannibalism were spread wide. Andrei's mother would warn him to stay in the yard constantly, or else he would end up like his older brother, who was supposedly kidnapped and eaten. And while this story has never been verified, it definitely made an impact on Chikatillo. And if growing up in all of that sounds pretty bad, I mean, it is. It makes Gary, Indiana seem awesome. But it got even worse for young Andrei, who struggled in school because of poor eyesight, chronic bedwetting into his teens brought on by him being born with water on the brain. If all of that wasn't bad enough, as he matured, he found that his joystick suffered from some serious drift.
That is the floppiest wiener I've ever had in my hand.
Desperate to prove to his peers that he could compensate, he attempted an encounter with a female classmate who was not ready to join his party. During the struggle, Andrei realized that violence and pain allowed his joystick to finally send a signal
Now the hot dog is
directly into the front of his Soviet-issue trousers. After failing to qualify for university, Andrei took a job as a telephone engineer, until he was caught working his joystick on a job site, completely oblivious to the fact that he was still within full view of his work crew. Humiliated and dejected, Andrei moved on to the much safer career of school teacher.
Anyway, today's lesson is...
And this worked out as you might expect, but much longer than you might think. Considering that Andrei was shuffled from school to school because he was not just playing with his own joystick, but helping students play with theirs as well.
Listen, I am simple, devoted educator. Is it wrong to roughhouse with students? Yeah. Is it wrong to touch students in educational matter? Yeah. Is it wrong to fondle their innocent yet tender yet supple young?
Once he was ultimately blacklisted from the education system, he was able to get a civil services job as a production auditor to check quotas on various plants around the USSR. And this was great for Andrei, but bad for the people of Rostov. Because the freedom and mobility his new position gave him, it allowed him the room to escalate his violent tendencies. Picking up women from bus depots, tenderloin districts, and most often train stations, Andrei would violate and defile them, using a penknife or his own teeth to cause them to fight. Because the harder they struggled, the harder the signal from his joystick was sent, more often than not, directly into the front of his britches. He would also lure children, because that's just the kind of guy he was. The name Rostov Ripper came because of the absolute horrific conditions the victims would be found in. Deep cuts, chunks bitten out of the body, some so mangled that in one instance, a passerby who reported finding it thought it was an animal carcass, half devoured by a predator. As the bodies racked up, police began establishing patterns, narrowing the focus to the common last known locations of victims. Through most of the time he was committing these crimes, he was right on the cusp of being caught by authorities. In one murder, he was the primary suspect. Because of a bizarre twist in genetic fate, his blood type and the fluids found at the scene didn't match. That's because Andrei Chikatillo had a condition known as non-secretor, a rare condition that prevented blood cells from being introduced into the various other body fluids like saliva. So when tested against his blood, the fluids recovered didn't match. Police were left no other choice but to let Andrei just go on his merry way. After establishing the pattern, police decided to set up a stakeout at one of the train stations, canvassing and questioning all individuals that looked like possible suspects. When skimming through the reports, Andrei Chikatillo's name came up as one of the names of people questioned. Examination of his employment records began lining up time, place, and opportunity. He was placed under surveillance where 4 plainclothes officers caught him attempting to lure away a woman at a train station and brought him in for questioning. Placed in a KGB headquarters cell, he initially protested his arrest, claiming it was a mistake or retribution by the party for unpermitted plumbing work. That's not a euphemism. He genuinely thought that because of some unpermitted plumbing work that the Soviet party was out to get him. That was a long-standing thing with him. Communism. However, on interrogation, he confessed. He ended up confessing to the murders that police had attached to the case. He then continued and confessed to another 20. A psychiatrist who had been brought in to view the interrogation believed that Andrei had murdered many more than he was willing to confess to. At trial, the prosecution presented the facts. They had witness testimony, blood samples, time and place correlation, a confession, a psychiatric examination, purchase receipts, and mountains of other evidence. However, little did they know that Andrei still had one trick up his sleeve. As they discussed the assault on a woman, Andrei suddenly stood up, pulled out his joystick, and began rattling it around, yelling, "Look at this useless thing. What could I do with such a useless thing?" At the end of the trial, Chikatillo was found guilty by a 3-judge panel. Jury trials are not a thing in Soviet Russia. He was sentenced to execution, and 3 days later, he was taken to a concrete chamber and had a single bullet violently implanted right behind his ear. Andrei Chikatillo's life and execution have a lot of parallels to the Soviet system. At the end of the day, the people of Rostov were able to return to their Soviet life, waiting in lines, missing out on the decadence of capitalism like Pizza Hut, and able to sleep secure in the knowledge that one day they'll be the leaders in producing some of the best dashcam footage on the internet. Hands down. That's what I'm talking about. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. If you liked what you saw, please feel free to hit the like and subscribe, ring the bell for notifications if you want to see more. If you want to butt actually me, please do. I'm always happy to learn more. And until next time, toodaloo.
Наше любимое животное. Я люблю всех животных. Кошки, собак. Кошка. У них больше как-то все.